Welcome to Genuine Live, a weekly conversation about what we believe and how we live it. At Genuine Media, we believe that conversation about our beliefs, particularly across difference, is a spiritual discipline and not a political tactic. We're here to show you how to do it. I'm Kendall Ciarra.
And I'm Alessandra Biaggi.
And today, we're joined by Ciarra Jones, a theologian, writer, and consultant whose work centers on one core belief: belonging. Ciarra earned her BA in American Studies from UC Berkeley and
Go
her
Bears.
master's Go Bears, and her master's of theological studies from Harvard University. Her work lives at the intersection of theology, psychology, and belonging. As the host of the Right There With You podcast and the creator behind the Gardening Theologian on social media, she's built a community for people who've been pushed out of religious spaces, but aren't yet ready to give up on the sacred altogether. Whether she's writing, teaching, or posting gardening videos that turn into theological reflections, she's built a community for those deconstructing religious harm and searching for a spirituality that doesn't require them to abandon themselves. Ciarra, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Genuine Live.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. And I need to steal that bio because that's better than my own bio that I wrote from high school. That was the best encapsulation of my work I've ever heard. So better than I encapsulated myself.
We'll send it to you.
Yeah, we'll send it to you.
No problem at all.
That's how we see you,
Yes.
Ciarra. That's how we see you.
It's yours.
Well, I'm so lucky. This already our pre-talk before the pod has been rich and amazing. And I've just been so incredibly just inspired by your all's approach to deconstruction, but also taking this lens of deconstruction, this process of challenging what we think, know, and believe, and taking it out of just being in the sphere of the religious space and saying, like, how does this actually apply to deconstructing all the narratives that comprise how we see ourselves, how we see one another, and even how we
Right.
create our social structures. I think that's so.
Thank you.
Ciarra, I want to just start with something that's really simple, which is like, what is deconstruction? Because we just use this word. It's kind of big. It's a little academic. And for people who are not part of the deconstructing folks on social media, what is deconstruction?
Yes, such a good question. Something I will say is I never thought deconstruction would even come into our popular vernacular. So that's like been so interesting to see all of us talking about deconstruction in a new way. And I think TikTok really catapulted deconstruction into like the mainstream conversation. And so we talk about deconstruction, usually we call it religious deconstruction, but you don't have to use those terminologies together, those terms together. And it really is challenging, as I mentioned, what we think, what we know, and what we believe, particularly as it was taught to us. Many of us, whether it's a religious idea, like for example, I grew up with the religious idea that queer people could not be accepted by God if they accept themselves. Some of us grew up with ideas that are non-religious but are still religiously connected. For example, maybe you grew up in a family where you're a woman identified person and it was expected that you're married and have children at a certain age. Even if your family is not religious, there's still a narrative that is shaping your life and your perspective of what is the right way to live. And so deconstruction is really challenging. What have we been told about the world that is true, that is ontologically true, meaning we cannot challenge it, meaning it is part of the fabric of reality, that actually can be troubled, that actually can be challenged, that actually can be teased out. And so many of us are operating in narratives that actually cage us, and we don't even know that we can open that door and come into a whole new perspective. And whether that's religious in nature, social in nature, or something else, there is a way to see the world that is different than the way that we see it. And we assign right and wrong to those perspectives. But deconstruction says, is it right or wrong? Is it good or bad? Or is it just challenging what we know, think, and believe, and continuing to expand our perspective? So how is that?
I can imagine that this is like a pretty terrifying thing for people to hear.
Yes.
Because, like, you know, if you're thinking about your belief system, most of us feel pretty firmly planted where we've been raised, what's been watered in us, like, you know, to use a gardening metaphor, if I will. But Yeah, I think that deconstruction, as you describe it, I can imagine that is very, very, very threatening, and it's
Mm,
scary to people to, like,
mm,
question what they've been taught um, and to maybe change what they
mm.
believe after that kind of questioning. I guess I'm, like, wondering if you can help us, like, root this in your own personal experience, like, when
Yes.
you were starting to deconstruct your own faith practice, for example, your own religious upbringing.
Yeah.
What was it scary for you? Was it what was going through your body and mind in those times?
It is terrifying to leave the ideas that shape our life, even if some of those ideas are corrosive to our well-being. They ultimately still like insulate our reality and they
Yep.
protect us and they are what we know. And stepping outside
Yeah.
of that is terrifying. And so before moving into the personal, I do want to say, taking your plant metaphor, which I love it. Even like folks out there who are really into houseplants, eventually you have to repot a lot of your plants because they grow out of that space.
Mm.
They have to be
Uh-huh.
moved into another environment, and the plant has to adjust to
That's
that
right.
environmental change. In a lot of ways, if we think about deconstruction as it relates to religion, a lot of religious communities teach us you stay in your pot. You never leave
Mm.
that pot. But we see
Oh,
within nature, within like the process of growth and development, you need to leave the pot to continue to expand. That is part of the process of expansion. And so we actually in the church are going against the laws of nature that says growth and environment are deeply tied, and we have to continue to monitor the environment, meaning monitor what we tell people about themselves, monitor what we tell people about God, because that shapes their well-being. And so I think, one thing I mentioned in that statement is that like many of us are caged in certain theologies, and that was
yeah.
my understanding now, or that's my understanding now, 10 years after deconstruction. So to drop it into the personal, I'm 32 years old now. I realized I was queer when I was 19. And I grew up Assemblies of God, Pentecostal, fundamentalists. Any
Wow.
man Assemblies of God people out there? I
Shout
know you feel
out.
me. Yeah, shout out. Assemblies of God is complicated, especially as a Black person, because it is a white denomination effectively. But many Assemblies of God churches are pretty diverse as well. And so my church was white led, but it was diverse in its congregations, like demographics. I name all that because my deconstruction was multifold. It was around my gender, it was around my race, and it was around my sexuality. And so I grew up Assemblies of God. I adhered to fundamentalist theology. I lived in it. In high school, I would pray multiple hours a day. I wanted to be a pastor. I spent hours in my youth group community. Like I was, I was in there Monday, Wednesday, Sunday. I led youth group programs. I led youth conferences with my church, like steeped in these theologies, and I was never going to leave them. And many of us grow up within a theology called dying to the flesh. This idea that when you have parts of you that challenge God, for me, it was my queerness, and that came up
Mm.
when I was like 16 or 17. The first thing you do is repress that part. You pray that part away. You cut off that part because you're told this part of me that's arising is not part of God. It is a part of flesh. And so we have this idea that we can't challenge or be curious about God on one end, which is called like cherry picking theology. And then we have dying to the flesh theology, this idea that not only can we not be curious about our theological ideas, but there is a part of us that is bad. And every time that part comes up, we need to make sure it doesn't take over, that the Holy Spirit or God or divinity is the most present part. And so I think in many ways for Christians, there's a bifurcation of self. And when you're living in the theology, it feels safe. It feels safe that you're praying away
Yes.
the gay. It feels safe that you're pushing away your anger or discomfort or whatever you've learned is part of flesh. That feels like a safe process. But for me, I started praying away the gay around 16. And then when I became 19, I was at UC Berkeley. I was in a whole new environment, if we want to use that pot metaphor. And I'm getting all these new ideas around queerness. I'm in my queer studies classes that are teaching me about LGBTQ justice. I'm in my Black history classes that are teaching me about Black religion outside of Christianity. All this information is helping me to start challenge this perspective. And all of a sudden, this belief that I had that cutting off parts of myself was keeping me safe made me realize actually is that keeping me caged? Is it keeping me caged from understanding parts of who I am? Is it keeping me caged from seeing the divinity in others? Because I'm in my LGBTQ classes at Berkeley. I don't know I'm gay yet, but I love the queer and trans people I'm meeting in those classes. I love them. I think they're incredible. And all of a sudden I'm like, am I gonna live in a theology that not only tells me to hate this part of myself that's coming up, but a part of them that I love? And so all of a sudden I realized that the theologies I thought were rescuing me were actually a prison keeping me away from my authentic self and keeping me separated from being able to love the authenticity of others. And so leaving theologies are incredibly scary. Leaving any perspective that has insulated us and told us it kept us safe is incredibly scary. But oftentimes, the more information we have, we can start to see what we think is keeping us safe and insulating us might actually be a cage that's keeping us from knowing who we are more deeply and knowing the other more deeply. And I think any theological idea that separates us from seeing the innate divinity in ourselves or the innate divinity in something else, someone else or something else, needs to be challenged, because I don't think God pushes us towards disconnection. And I think that really was my process. But it is terrifying. The whole process is terrifying.
That's extremely well said. And I think, for anybody who's listening who acknowledges what you said when you started, which is that like deconstruction is an extremely scary thing because it challenges the core part of your identity, right? We tie these stories and these beliefs to who we are, and to change and to challenge who we are at its core is really hard. Like, where do you shop for new beliefs if then your belief system no longer works, right? Because I think a lot of this conversation is and lives in, as we've mentioned, like in this academic setting, as Kendall
Yep.
talked about. And it's really, it can become inaccessible. And yet it is so important, I think, to the moment we're living in politically and culturally.
Mm-hmm.
And like as humans, like we've got to do it in order to like see
Mm.
each other, even the ones we disagree with, especially the ones we
Yes.
disagree with, as human. And like some of the theologies that some people out there are practicing can create that division that prevents that. So like, how do we invite that across that difference? Because that to me is like such a challenge of this time.
One, I want to say part of deconstruction that I think isn't talked about. One, the process of challenging what we think, know, and believe. I want to say we never arrive. It's a lifelong process. And I want people to know that. Like, I've been deconstructing for 10 years and life continues to humble me and I continue to have to deconstruct all the time. I think I've gotten rid of one thing and something else is there, So I just want to say that for folks. And we often don't talk about a component of deconstruction that I think is important, which is reconstruction. That
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
saying to
That.
people, leave everything you've ever been taught and don't bring it into something new. And that's why I did highlight that a lot of my deconstruction happened in the university setting where I was inundated with new ideas as I was shedding everything that had ever shaped me. And that helped me a little bit because as I was like, I really was like, to take all the academic language out of it. Can I cuss?
Yes.
Go for it. Okay,
please.
Yeah.
This is genuine media. Be your genuine, authentic self. Please.
Like, it's just
we cuss a lot.
okay, good. I just want to say, like, it's really like fucking destabilizing to have an idea of God that has shaped your whole life, because a lot of ideas of God aren't just like the idea of me being queer or not queer, the idea of that queerness is okay or not okay. It's not just tied to like, does God approve or not approve of my sexuality? It's tied to, am I physically safe every day? Like the first time I decided I'm going to accept my queerness, I had this deep fear that bad things were going to happen to me. And in fact, around that time, I had some major losses in my life that I correlated to accepting my queerness. It felt like I am outside of God's protection. And if you are a person who's deconstructing and you're not deconstructing religiously, but you're maybe deconstructing ideas from your family, you might feel like, now I'm outside of my family's protection if I leave this idea that I need to get married at a certain time or have a baby at a certain time or have a certain career, have a certain degree. Like, it is scary to leave those structures. And I was very lucky to do deconstruction in a place that could hold me, like I said, as I was shedding. Like, I could go to my queer studies professor and be like, I grew up in a church that says I need to like pray away the gay, and they could be like, read this queer theologian. Like, they were giving me resources to catch myself. And if we bring it to gardening, something that I love about plants is for plants to grow, you have to prune them, but you can easily over prune a plant. It's a very slow process. Like, you should come and prune a leaf or two a day, because if you ask it to transform too aggressively, it like might not heal quickly. It might be overwhelmed. It might not. And I think I want people to see themselves like that in the deconstruction process. It's a slow pruning, not all these big chops and transformations. And in Western religion and Western spirituality, we love rapid transformation. We love rapid transcendence. So I want to say for folks, let it be slow, go at the pace of your body, and let it be trauma informed. If there are ideas that are not safe enough for you to explore and deconstruct, do it when your body's safe.
It's really practical and
Tease certain
helpful.
ideas. Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh.
I know
Ooh,
there's so much
okay.
there. There's so
There
much there to touch and to play with, man.
Okay, so one of the pieces of your story in particular that seemed to be powerful, um, is looking at, Christina Cleveland's concept of imagining God as a Black woman.
But yeah,
Um,
I'm looking for
and
that book right now. I know
I
where it is.
love I love this because the second you say God as a Black woman, someone's gonna say, No, God uses he, him pronouns because I think
Yeah.
there's like a weird association there, and if it's weird for you to think of God manifested as a different kind of person than the one that you've been
Mm,
taught, then
mm,
there's something to question there.
mm,
And what did imagining God as a
mm.
woman for you do for your personal theology, and how did it, like, heal the parts of yourself that maybe needed to be healed?
You know, God is a Black woman, I think, is truly I really think it's like the prolific text of our time. Like, I think everyone should
Yeah.
read this text. I think it's so brilliant. And I think what Christina Cleveland has done in that text is a little bit undersung, to be honest. Like, even, she opens up that text. I think she's in France when it opens up, maybe Italy, and she's like visiting the Black Madonna. And I've never seen the Black Madonna, and I don't know actually much about the Black Madonna outside of reading her work and research. So I need to do my own perspective. But what I love about that opening is she talks about how, like, wherever she was looking at the statue, you cannot touch it. And she was like saying, like, she says she's like sitting there, her body's kind of vibrating, and she's like, I need to touch the statue. And so like she touches it and like an alarm goes off and she's like running through like running
Amazing.
through like France or Italy, like away from like the police because she touched this. She was also saying it was like the first it was that breaking that rule was her act of deconstruction in that moment.
Mm.
Mm,
To say, like, my Black female body, like, has a need to be fed by touching this statue, and I'm going to bend or break the rules that are saying I can't do that to get spiritually fed, to get to what I need in this moment. I think there was something in her around breaking the rules and, like, breaking away out of, like, narratives of being a good woman, which I think comes from Christianity. But I just love
yes.
that moment,
Yes.
and something I think she says, I wish I got the exact language, but I think she says, like, to, like, be, like, a marginalized person in the church is to be, like, a fugitive in your own body, like,
Mm,
to have to always be, like, in these theologies that see you as criminal, that see you as bad, that see you as wrong. And so
mhm.
I think in general, to be a Black
Yeah.
queer woman in society, like, you understand the power of white men, and they are not always the safest place for me or the safest space for me. And so it really is a conundrum when you think about women in general, but like Black queer folks in particular, praying to a white God. Like, there is already a sense of rejection and a sense of selfhood that is fractured that you're bringing to that God. That God really looms over you. And something she says about seeing God as a Black woman is it goes away from this looming God, Father Sky God, as she calls him, and
Father
it
Sky God.
becomes she calls Black woman God, she who loves our hot mess. And I
Mm.
think that I love that framing because it's like a Black woman God is an approachable God, it is a nurturing God. And we come to that God, I think, so differently. Even the parts of ourselves we show to that God, I think, are different. So for
Mm.
me, that framework shift allowed me to, I think, not always come to God like, do you see me as like asking the question, like, do you see me as worthy or how do I
Mm,
become worthy for you? But to come to a God that I think empathizes with my experience of unworthiness in a world that makes me feel unworthy,
Mm.
with a God that empathizes with what it means to live in a world that's made me have to turn against myself and cannibalize myself. Like, that God is concerned about me versus a God who is asking me to demonstrate my perfection so that I can be received. And I think that orientation shift saved my life. I really
Mm.
truly feel like it was
mm.
life-saving.
I can, imagine that. I can imagine it being life-saving.
Same. And I think there's so much that you're saying that I think so many people can probably relate to, especially those who have like left religion altogether or just feel like there's no home for them there. And I think one of the things that you said that really resonates with me is that when you don't feel like like the place that you're part of, that you're the faith that you're part of is like representative of who you really are. You're kind of like spiritually homeless and you're like, where do I go? Right. Like, and then you have no ground underneath your feet. And that's
Mm,
probably one of the scariest feelings. And I
mm,
feel like at divinity school, the biggest thing that I took away was like, oh, I was raised Roman Catholic, and oh, actually, like women. There are women here who interpret the Bible, and like there's a place for me there still. And I was like, there's a place for me in Catholicism after all these years of rejecting it. That's crazy. So what you're saying. It's like each one of us has our own flavor of what this looks like for each of us, and finding it. It's almost like it shouldn't be this way, but it's almost like finding this like tiny little needle, and you're like undo it, and you're like, oh my goodness, it's always been there this whole time, but it's almost hidden by the illusions that we're given
Mm.
through religion and through faith and through our conditioning and all
And
of
all
the
yeah,
things.
and also what was, like, translated to us, because I
Right.
feel that, like, so much of my own journey is very similar to that, Alessandra, like, not
Right.
feeling like there was a space or a place for me. I have been long been obsessed with the difference between white Christians and black Christians,
Mm.
because boy, oh boy, is there a difference. And
Yeah.
growing up amongst a community of, like, just it's a very, very white Christian town,
Mm.
and the, like, judgment is thick, the hypocrisy is there, and
Mm.
I had this, like, obsession with this question of, like, white Christians and black Christians are using the same book to inform their political perspective, and yet they end up on the opposite end. Why? Why, if they're reading the same book? And we just, like, see this difference, because if you actually study history, Black Christianity and white Christianity are almost incomparable. One was forged in
Mm.
resistance, and
Mm.
the other is often in service of empire.
Yes.
One provided solace to enslaved people, while the other provided a theological grounding for being a slave master. They share the name. They're, like, only same in name, but not in lineage at all.
Mm.
And I have never really known as a white person what to do with that difference, because I do
Mm.
not identify
Yeah.
with the God of empire. I
Mm.
identify with Jesus, who is in solidarity with people who are suffering. The black tradition was so embodied, like
Mm.
embodied spirituality was like the source,
Mm.
because that was so often what was accessible. And that knowledge was obviously very much like kind of poo-pooed on by white people, but that to me was so meaningful, because so much of my own faith experience has been embodied spirituality. Like, that has been my connection to a higher power. And I think for a lot of people that is true, but yet people are so afraid to talk about this kind of, like, embodied relationship with
Yeah.
spirituality. One of the things I love about your work is that, like, you're kind of showing the sacred within gardening, which is a different venue. And I'm wondering, what are other kinds of venues where people can experience the sacred outside a religious community if they are looking for more of an embodied spirituality?
If I had my glasses, I would throw them because everything is I'm so moved
I'm
by everything you're saying.
I mean, that was like a long-winded, perhaps diatribe,
Oh, yeah.
but it made sense in my spirit, so I said it.
No.
What do we do if
Yeah.
we don't wanna be a part of the religious communities that we were
Yeah.
raised in, and yet we still have this hunger, this feeling inside of our bodies where we wanna be connected to something, we still believe there's something there.
Yes. I have a few things I wanna say in this response because that's just such a good question. One, as I mentioned, I did wanna introduce the word reconstruction for people, which is and
Mm,
again, just like deconstruction, reconstruction is lifelong, and I think that we go back and forth between these processes. And for me, in my own deconstruction, I started at 19 and now I'm 32. And through that process, I've been agnostic. I would say even now I'm a religious pluralist that spends a lot of time in progressive Christianity still, but I pull from many other perspectives of God and other communities and cultural perspectives of God to understand who God is. And I think the hardest thing for a lot of folks in deconstruction processes, period, is you have to release the idea of binary and simple answers. You have
mm.
to
Yeah.
accept
So
questioning right?
yep.
Right? Go ahead. No,
Yeah,
please,
you
please, I'm here.
do.
Yes,
It's the
yes.
whole world is set up in a binary, and everywhere you turn, you're, like, stuck in it.
One of my friends, Christian Smith, who you all might be familiar with his work. He has a Holy Smokes and Cigars podcast, and something he says to me a lot about his work as a pastor in this deconstruction space is, sometimes folks get frustrated that he will answer their question with a question or turn them back
Yes.
to themselves.
Yes.
And part of the process of deconstruction is trying to imbue people with self-trust
Mm.
and to trust their own ability to come to answers. Even if I have an answer as someone who, yes, has the degrees, I want to turn back to my audience and say, what do you think? How do you know God? Because I think that's how we have a revolution
Mm.
around who defines
Mm.
and names and owns God. But ultimately, I want to say like deconstruction can happen anywhere. For me, the deepest places were in my garden because I learned reason deconstruction happened for me in my garden is because I knew nothing about gardening, and my garden, my first year I ever planted it, still thrived, and it was this beautiful
Wow.
process of me realizing
That's
it's
neat.
not about me being perfect. It's not about me like, all
Mm.
this idea that I need to be perfect and need to know is a farce because I came every day
Yeah.
to this garden not knowing a goddamn thing, and
Right.
now it's flourishing, and that helped me really start to tease out fundamentalist perfectionism and other things that were coming up. But for me, it was my garden. For you, it might be concerts. Like, something I think that's big on music actually
Ooh, I
is
love
like
that.
a lot of people miss the musical component of church once they deconstruct or they
Yeah.
leave their primary church. And so I say, like, go to the musician that makes you feel connected with God. Go to that concert, go to that space.
Ah.
What do you feel in your body with others? What is happening for you in
Mm.
that space? For some, it might be hiking. Nature's an amazing place to be in their in to feel and know God. For some people, it might be redefining a practice like meditation. When I used to run a deconstruction group, I used to do an exercise with queer folks where I would say a lot of queer folks deconstruct and then they are afraid to reconstruct because
Mm.
the only God they know in their body is a God that rejects them. So
Mm.
why would they go back to any God? And so a process I would do with them was like, even if you think it's fake, once a week, I want you to sit for 5 minutes and imagine there's a God that loves you. And just tell me what that
Mm.
imagination, what even that projection process feels
Beautiful.
like. So for some people, the deconstruction might be somatic. It could be even moving your body, getting in the gym, going to acupuncture. I love acupuncture, but I think I see it happen on multiple layers for people. But I think somatic, think about body movement. You can think about it scholastic, think about expanding who you read. And I think you can think about it environmental, think about where you go. And I
Mm.
think if you can think about it in those buckets, it's helpful.
I
Wow, that is
I
such a
know, that's just, like it's so helpful to hear that, and it's also it's like you, like, light the path that's extremely I mean, it's very dark, and it's also, like, that unknown wilderness, that, like, spiritual wilderness is a very scary place to go, and to even imagine the opposite of what you've been taught. Like, I was taught as a Catholic, like, God is watching you and, like, you're
Mm,
bad if you do this thing. And, like, and frankly, it's like a fear. It's a fear based thing. And now I'm like, no, God is watching me and God is like, humans are messy because that's what humans are. And like humans make mistakes and that's okay because that's part of like being human. And like, you're still worthy and you're still capable of being loved and held and all of those things. And I think when you talk about the binary, I mean, I'm obsessed with the binary. Kendall knows this.
please.
I'm like literally obsessed with this because in politics, which is like where I come from, everything is like there's no nuance. Everything is like you're bad, you're good, I'm here, you're on this team, I'm on that team, you're against me, you're with me. There's nothing of like actually like but I'm kind of like with you a little bit, but I'm like more over here and there's no grayscale for people to live. And I think one of the biggest things about deconstructing the binary, good, bad, Republican, Democrat, keep going. Like they're all over the place. Is just that like nobody really lives purely in one space or the other, right? Being a
Mm,
human means you're living in that messy middle place.
Mhm.
And that that alone, it might sound so trite to like so many people, but I'm telling you, that alone allowed me to be like, oh shit. The people
mm,
who I have judged I've done so unfairly. Like and so then it
mm,
allowed me to go back to these spaces and then to, like, find that practice, to then see the humanity in others. So what you're describing of, like, finding your place and, like, really imagining what it's like to have a different kind of God. It's like all of these components actually allow you to do the reconstruction work and to build this new spirituality or faith
mm.
that
Cool.
I think we're not really encouraged always to do, but it's such
We're not
necessary human
encouraged.
work. It's just I mean, truly, like what you've just said is so inspiring to me.
How scary it is to leave a binary and how beautiful it is to like leave a world that's black and white and come into a kaleidoscope of color. But that feels overwhelming.
Totally.
It can feel too bright, I guess, if you've only been looking.
It's
Yeah.
I mean, the
Yeah.
idea of queering is very much like if you're looking at the verb of queering, that's what it is. It's stepping outside of binaries.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Like you're
absolutely.
just applying that lens to your whole life.
Yes,
That's what
absolutely.
I mean, that's the gift of queerness to me is that you are stepping outside of these binaries
Mm.
and you just get to say like, actually none of this fits.
Yes,
Something different, please.
yes.
Not
I
this or
was
that, something else.
1000%. I mean, I think what's so cool
Yeah.
about queerness is like to be queer is to live in the wilderness that Christianity tells you is unlivable. So then you're like, everyone come in here because it's actually popping out here, you know? And like because you're living in your body everywhere that theology says you can't, and you're surviving and you're happy. That itself challenges every
Mm,
most theological narratives you can give it, you know. Something I do say in my work is that, yeah, one of the axes of inequality is spiritual, and that part of societal inclusion, if we want to revolutionize society, it necessitates the reimagination of God. I do
mm.
not think we can have the society that we want if we don't deconstruct and collectively reimagine who we say the Christian God is, because our law and policies in it.
I mean, for me, as someone who looks at, like, our political systems and goes, "Okay, we've got one group of people co-opting God." Like,
Mm,
really for pretty much everyone else. Like, barring I mean, there's really only identification that I think we really the dominant identification with religion, period,
Yeah.
in America is if you say religion, people think Christianity. If you say Christianity, people think white evangelical
mm,
Christians.
mm.
And if people say white evangelical Christians, then people think white Christian nationalists.
Yeah.
And then those are the people who have God.
Mm, mm.
What? Of
Oof.
course! Of course that our spiritual inequality then yields
Yep.
systemic inequality,
Yes.
right?
Absolutely. And something Reverend Dr. Kelly Brown Douglas says in her book, Stand Your Ground, Black Bodies and the Justice of God by Trayvon Martin. She talks about this theological idea she calls natural law theo-ideology, which is like basically Christians' belief that like God ordained the world, white Christians' belief that God ordained the world already imbued with spiritual worthiness, and like
Mhm,
black people were imbued like with spiritual curse basically. And that like one thing that I say all the
mhm,
time is like we cannot think about whiteness in America without constructs of divinity. Like one reason whiteness is protected is because not only do we say whiteness is better racially, but that it's more important spiritually, theologically.
Yep.
And something else we did to black people is we put them within this lineage of something called the Hamitic myth. And so in biblical text, Noah's son Ham is cursed because one day Noah gets drunk and he's naked and Ham clothes him and you're not supposed to see your dad naked. That's so complicated. I feel like that was a trap because it's like, Noah, you were naked. So,
Yeah.
but you're not supposed to see your dad naked. So even though he tried to clothe him, he was cursed, and he was cursed with a dark mark that white Christians,
Mm.
white slave master Christians saw as a sign that, you can enslave. And so when we think about white supremacy itself and the creation of white supremacy, we say in theology that they're co-constructed. Race and religion are co-constructed. They're happening simultaneously. Religion shapes how we understand race, and race shapes how we understand religion. And so I think if we look at border policy, if we look at reproductive rights, if we look at gender, if we look at gender and sexuality, underneath all of those policies, we will find theological ideas of what is
Yes.
right and what is wrong. And right now, we're seeing in the U.S., unfortunately, our elected officials and many of those in power are moving towards conservative policies. I mean,
Yeah.
I saw a pastor preach or on YouTube a few months ago. I did a video about a pastor preach how to vote like Jesus. And he was saying, this is why the Bible is pro borders. This is why the Bible is anti immigration. I mean, people are propping up
Oh
their
my
policies
goodness.
through biblical text, you know? So,
right.
yeah, what are
This
your
I think
thoughts?
this high no, I think this highlights something though that I have found to be a real like important gap in our politics because as Kendall mentioned, right? Like you think about Christianity and then all you just draw the through line and now you're into like alt right, right? And
Mm,
the left has basically like just given up this territory in a way that, you know, sometimes you see sparks of it, like, and it's resurging in some places. You have James Tallarico. I feel like now I talk about him every time, but you have James Tallarico, who is so brilliant in Texas, who's using his faith in his political leadership. And it's beautiful because he knows, he has the knowledge like you of the text, and he uses it when he speaks, and he uses it in a way that challenges the concepts that people are bringing to him.
Like,
and there are others.
Warnock
Definitely.
is obviously more publicly talking about God as a reverend.
Totally.
You see it in some others, but it is really rare.
It's rare. And just to this point though, because I like Mike, I have a question here about this. When we look at our politics, and I think so many of us feel hopeless, we feel numb, we feel scared, we feel like immovable. And I think that religion and faith and spirituality can actually be a place that opens doors that we cannot see. And so I just want to know from your perspective, how can we encourage, right, these lawmakers on the left to become more involved and embodied in their faith and spirituality, and to bring their whole selves, like Kendall said, their embodied self into their leadership in a way that is genuine and can actually move people in ways that I think that they can't see. They have the power to do it, because I think this is I think there's many keys. I think this is one of them.
Oh my gosh. So I'm so glad to start seeing progressive politics start engaging with faith, because I think one thing I said, and I have to get my friend Don Abram, who also went to HDS, he was my roommate, and now he runs an organization called Pride in the Pews. They do amazing work.
I've heard of Pride in the Pews.
Oh, you all should definitely connect with Don. Don is amazing. Like, he also is just so politically insightful. So I think you all would have a great connection. And something he and I used to talk about in our little rinky-dink, really broke down apartment in Somerville was, you know, the Democratic Party is making it continues to fail in some ways because they have conceded that religion is owned by conservatives. They just have decided God is awash. And it's what they do is they alienate any type of progressive leaning spiritual people. Have nowhere really to go except conservative if they want to vote, if they want their faith to be in their politics. Democrats give them no pathway for that, for them to bring their faith-based values there. And something we see is that, you know, a lot of Black churches, I appreciate we talked a bit about Black and white theological epistemology. Kendall, you brought that up, which is why are Black and white theologies framed differently? What's interesting is a lot of Black and white churches, unfortunately, agree that queerness and transness is bad, or they agree that women have a certain place in society. But Black congregants often will not vote that way, because to vote that way also means they're voting with white supremacy. They will make that distinction. White folks are less likely to do that nuanced distinction work. And so I do think just in general, Democrats can catch more white voters if they would put it within their spirituality within their process, because it would get those who are white leaning and religious, but tend to vote conservative because we don't give them a pathway. Right. I think another issue that we have, so I think there's one issue, which is we've conceded that conservatives own God. And I think that is a big failure. I think number two, Democrats have also made the mistake of just making fun of people who are religiously inclined.
I agree with that.
Yes.
That was dumb as hell. That was dumb as hell, because you might think that their ideas are funny, but there is money behind them. There is millions and billions of dollars behind conservative religious lobbying. So I think making fun of them as like, these people are idiots with no power was stupid. Because like, you might think their ideas are ridiculous, but on Sunday they have 10,000 people in that church. They have 5,000 people in that church.
For sure they do.
Conservatives understand pastors as being part of their religion, as part of their political strategy in a way that's
right.
And Democrats have really dampened down the power of pastors, which is a mistake, because Black church pastors in particular have so much community-based pool. So to not bring them in is like, is a failure. So I think one is, this, I think saying God is a wash is a failure, but I think also saying God is silly was a failure of the Democratic Party. And I think now it's about us putting forward progressive interpretations of faith in God and saying, like, fight us on it then. Like I think the reason I'm aiming to fight us on it is because the last thing I think that has been an issue for the Democratic Party is this middle ground thinking. The middle ground does not exist when people's humanity is on the table. There is no middle ground there. We've made religion silly, and we also have said when conservatives are hardline on something, let's come to the middle of that hard line. And I think when we do come to the table for God, we come to the middle versus saying, you see God this way, we see God expansively and completely different, and we're okay with that disagreement. So I think those are a few things happening.
That's so well said, man.
I also think that there is there was this desire to, in an effort of pluralism, to go secular.
Yes.
To say, like,
Yes.
to
Yep.
just say, like, "Okay, you know what? We're gonna take God out of our politics completely." And I'm gonna give people the benefit of the doubt and say that the intention was probably pluralism, but they didn't know how to do that well, so they
Yes.
just went with
Yes.
secularism.
Yep.
Yes.
Because,
Yes.
I can understand people saying, like, "Look, we don't want the dominant religion to own in the Democratic Party to only be talking about Christianity."
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
there are a lot of people of diverse faith
Yeah.
practices that are equally passionate and important and sacred to them, and, like, we should
Mm.
be representative of those as well. And so it is a harder task because one side is just saying, this is
One.
our Christian
Yeah.
God, and this is
Yeah.
exactly what our Christian white male God loves. And on the other side, we have to say, this is what all of our
Mhm.
gods are aiming us towards. It's
Yeah.
like
Yes.
it's more of an orientation of
Yeah.
love as opposed to like, a set of rules and laws and regulations, which is just
Yes.
honestly a harder sales pitch and a harder thing to kind of like put into practice. I think it's a venue to talk about what matters most to people.
Yep.
And
Mm.
if we can reach
Mm.
people where they actually have deep belief and meaning, then, like, we can actually do some really good work there.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah.
Can
Okay.
I
Oh, you for sure, you
can
can
I
ask a
ask you both a
question.
question?
Please.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
you all asked me so many insightful questions around deconstruction. What do you hope folks leave with today around their
Hmm.
deconstruction journey, or what do you hope that
Mm.
they can apply to themselves around deconstruction?
I know this answer right away.
Alright,
I
give it to
think
me.
I think I just think that on the deconstruction side, I think what I would love to see is that people who feel fear about a challenged belief lead with curiosity rather than the fear, and practice that over and over and over again. Like, you have to say to yourself, like, "Oh, this is challenging my belief. Oh, but I'm scared. Oh, but I don't have to be. What's really there?" Like, giving language, whatever your language in your internal self is that works for you, to, like, really melt the hatred or the fear into something else. I think that's, like, the one thing that I wish more of us had the capability to do, and that we can all individually inspire in others just from our conversation and from being in the world.
As far as
Love the answer.
deconstruction goes, I think it's just a very, like, it's a very, like, personal journey for folks, and I mostly just think that what I want people to take away from this conversation, from your work specifically, Sarah, is, that even if you have left religious community, if there's a part of you that still is, like, spiritually hungry, that, like, wants to feel connected
Mm.
to a higher power you still kinda believe in, that there is a place for you and that there is a way forward for
Yeah.
you, and that you've articulated some, like, very practical steps that people can take to, like, start that process for themselves, because I know so many people who live in that space who have
Mm.
left a religious community for judgment and hypocrisy reasons, who have felt unloved by their churches from that
Totally.
they grew up in, and yet who feel, I say I tell them, like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to div school," or "I went to div school," or "I'm in div school," and they lean in because there's something that they want.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
want something. They're
Yeah.
searching for something, and that I just want them to know that God is available to them outside of any chapel,
Mm.
outside of any mosque, outside of any temple, outside of
Uh.
any physical construction, that it is, like, your birthright to
Yes.
have access to, a spiritual connection with a higher power.
Mm.
Mm.
And that you gave us those tools for people. So that was
Well
really cool.
oh, well, it's been I'm saying this has been the like, highlight of my month. Truly, like,
Oh.
this has been such a gift. You reminded me of Alice Walker has this beautiful quote in The Color when The Color Purple, where she says, like, basically, every time I met God in church, it's because everyone brought God in with them, and that, like, we
Mm.
don't make like, like God is not in the church, we share God, like God is
Yeah.
something we share between us. I think like as I mentioned in the beginning, and actually you highlighted this really brilliantly, Alessandra, which is like deconstruction. People have so much fear around that process because you do leave this idea that there is one, usually male pastor or male religious figure that can tell you how to live for God. And I think there can feel like a safety in following this prescription. But what I want folks to see is like there also can be a hindrance to self knowledge. There could be a hindrance to connection with others. And there's something so beautiful about leaving what we think is safety and stepping into what we think is a wilderness and actually finding out it's like a beautiful field of exploration
Mm.
and safety and community and connection. And so my life has taught me that everywhere someone has told me God isn't, God is exactly there. He actually is chilling there in a little tent.
Is okay. That's such a good line, man.
And so
So
I
good.
want people to go out and I want people to explore
Wow.
everywhere someone told them God wasn't and come back and tell me what they found. That's what I want people to do.
So beautiful. My
Oh,
gosh, I know. Thank you for you. What a
Yeah, of
gift.
course.
What
Yeah,
a
of
gift
course.
this was.
this is so much fun.
This is a blast.
I
Yeah,
hope
Really.
that this is
you guys are
actually
my
useful
friends.
to people because it's been just so fun for me.
It's been we've been loving it.
Amazing. Yeah.
Whether you all like it or not, the three of us are having a blast.
Thank you.
Gosh, I loved it.